Okay, hi guys. Thank you for joining us today. This is the second edition of Anti-Racist Cultural Leadership panel that we're doing in lieu of our normal artist residency um, at ONCA. Hi. So today we have Syra, Rodrigo, and Yony. And same as last time, everybody will get 10 minutes to kind of present an aspect of their work or something about how they're making or things that they're doing. And after we do that, then we'll have a little bit of time for questions and answers from between ourselves and from Persephone and Lydia, who are joining us now. Hi,
Oh,
guys.
brilliant. Hi, Persephone.
Hello. This is a great team. I gotta say, very solid crew. I'm very excited about this. Okay, so I guess first off, it's my pleasure to introduce Syra.
Hi.
Syra is a dear friend, but beyond that, can I tell them the nickname that you have?
Please.
Okay. We call Syra the momager because she will manage with care and love everybody all the time, always in charge. Syra is one of the organizers for Decolonize Fest and is an artist and a writer. And you're currently doing a master's in publishing at where again?
The University of Arts, which, yeah, I'm also
And
part of the end outsourcing campaign there. Yeah.
and also, Syra has a very kind of interesting history touring with the master musicians of Jijuku, which is pretty awesome. Anyway, without further ado, Syra, I'll let you talk to us now.
Thank you. Okay. So the project I wanted to talk about today is this scene that I've been making. Sorry, the light in here is really bright. It's a zine that was made for Decolonize Fest this year, which was an online edition of the festival. Just to go back to the basics, Decolonize Fest is an annual festival based in London, created by and for punks of colour. It's created to recognise the history of punks of colour, recognise our input into the genre, and celebrate the bands around to show the next generation what is possible for them. And we operate outside of the mainstream as a DIY punk collective. There's not many of us, but since the BLM protests and things, we've had a lot of interest from a lot of bigger mainstream publications like Maximum Rock and Roll and The Quietus, and yeah, I guess it's been an interesting learning curve putting a festival online, but also learning how to be discerning with who we want to work with and why, and making sure that everyone who we do work with are proper allies, I guess is the simplest way to put it. Obviously, the zine has a beautiful cover by Christy Searoad, who I believe is a friend of Nadia's. I've never met her, but her work's really wonderful. She's just done a series of postcards, which are definitely worth checking out, about community care and police violence. But yeah, the zine. This year, we had submissions from all over the world. 33 submissions, 55 pages. So it ended up being more of a book. So it was maybe the biggest project that I've ever worked on in terms of making a zine, because I've made a few zines in the past, but this one felt like a lot of responsibility, given the context of what was happening in the world after the protests, and the fact that we really do need platforms and spaces that centre people of colour more than ever. It was very interesting. I mean, our decision this year was to accept all submissions. I think there were maybe 2 or 3 that we didn't. But there was no like, it was about platforming, basically. That's what we wanted to do. And I think it turned out really well. The edition was the Resistance edition, and I think our tagline for it when we had our meeting with the zine team was to exist is to resist. So all of these submissions, they were very diverse. A lot of different takes, different politics, different philosophies, different backgrounds, but they all were valid, and they all came from punks of color, and that's who we cater for. So yeah, I think we did a pretty good job of platforming this year, and yeah, I'm very proud of the work that we did. Since then, I mean, the festival went really well, I thought, but it was a few months ago, but we're still, the sets only went up yesterday, actually. Check them out, some really good bands this year. And yeah, with the zine, since the festival, I've had press requests from, well, I'm going to be doing a zine talk at the Glasgow Zine Library, which should be pretty cool. And yeah, I think, yeah, it's a lot to think about where it's what I'm studying as well. Some kind of, it's all tying in together in a nice way. I'm studying publishing, and right now I'm sitting in discussions on diversity in the publishing industry, which, yeah, I think that is a thing that's definitely used for commercial. It's a very marketable idea at the moment, especially since the protests. And I think it's definitely worth being careful about doing things for the right reason. And my general rule is to respect the work that we've been given and to prioritize that above what any organization feel they can give us. Ultimately, yeah, this kind of became my baby, I guess. And yeah, there's a lot of we had a lot of good feedback from submitters saying, thank you so much for publishing this. I've never been platformed like this before. And we did really have submissions from all over the world. Tanzania, the States. We had quite a few from the States this year, actually. And yeah, I'm very proud of it. So thinking on, yeah, the idea of cultural leadership, I think, was a major theme in the email that I got from Nadia. And I've had a lot of thoughts about that, especially with the work I've been doing. It does feel kind of a bit scary at the moment out there politically, in this country especially. Like, yeah, the idea of building solidarity, I think, is really important for Decolonize Fest, because we are for the diaspora, I guess, which is a very wide term. And we're also anti-police. And I think in many ways we try to exercise the idea of not policing each other because we're a mixed group. And at the same time, we have to balance that with not compromising our ethos whatsoever, which is no racism, no homophobia, no Islamophobia. I mean, yeah, it's really important in this day and age. And yeah, the fight seems to be one that we really need to come together for. And I think as it's a celebratory event, I think we succeeded in creating a space this year that just made us want to dance together. Even if it was online, we were all in our bedrooms doing it, and it felt like a music festival. Yeah, I miss live gigs a lot. I think live gigs is a major thing that's kept me going, and live music for a long time. And I think we hope that it's going to be a real IRL festival next year, but it's really impossible to plan and really impossible to say at this point. But I'm hopeful that we'll share a dance floor again somehow. And yeah, I advocate for this group very strongly.
Thank you, Syra. I really have to say, I want to echo that Decolonize Fest is great. And Christy C. Road, who contributed the artwork for the book zine, also showed work with us last year and made this amazing tarot deck.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think maybe after this, I'll draw a tarot card for all of us today. But let's move on. This isn't about the future, it's about right now. And right now, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, a dear friend, a new friend who was an instant dear friend. We met on the dance floor of the Raincoats reunion show. Rodrigo Vaiapraia is a transdisciplinary DIY artist born in Setúbal. Did I say that right? We're working on my Portuguese. He started writing his songs and playing them live in 2013. Since then, he has put out 2 LPs, recorded with supporting bands made up of friends in various demos, singles, and EPs. These musical endeavors have been featured and talked about in various Portuguese and international publications and affirmed as outspoken descendants of the Riot Girl and the queercore movements. Playing live is not merely an opportunity to showcase the music, but also a time to create temporary communities regardless of the context and geography. Vaiapraia is the co-founder of Lisbon's music agency Maternidade, and will you say this for me? I just don't.
Rama Flor.
And that's the queer festival, right? Queer feminist festival.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that, Rodrigo. And without further ado, I give the floor to you, my friend.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me, Nadia and ONCA. I'd like to talk and read something that I wrote for you today. So, as Nadia said, I have been writing songs and playing in bands for a while, actually, since I was 16. And when I was in my last year of high school, I started composing songs as Vaiapraia. And without knowing, I began forging what has become my life's project so far. So making songs solo and with bands made up of sweet friends of mine that often tackle identity and the search for freedom. And today I'm going to talk about the importance context plays in my artistic practice. So I believe context demands a constant and eternal update, revision, and self-checking. And panlai is a word that doesn't exist, or at least didn't exist. It's a word I invented. It comes from the Portuguese insult panleiro, which translates as faggot. And this defined my context. So growing up as the only openly non-heterosexual male in my high school, bitter insults and confrontations marked my daily life and eventually mark who I have become. And so the words I heard were bishop and lairo, maricas, and all these loud, high-pitched shrieks such as hi, ui, which aim to be interjections with a femme-identified connotation, there to hurt me. And those shrieks made me shiver and cave in then. And obviously they're a shiny token of pride for me now. And I recognize the heavy privilege from which I benefit being raised as a Portuguese middle-class white kid. Only in my late teens, in an Anglo-Saxon context, a very dear friend of mine who is smart, ginger, and pale white, as well as born and raised in a white suburb of Chicago, pointed out in some convoluted and somehow crowded group conversation that I wasn't really white. And I was appalled. I guess identity is actually a floating concept to be used in case of fear, after all. Race will not be the center of my conversation, though. Still, I feel it's always important to be clear and honest about where you come from and to acknowledge my Europeanness, and above all, to be aware that race, class, and gender will always influence everyone's worlds and the way of navigating within it. And so Panley Punks is the song that I put out in 2016 in this digital split with my friend Philippe. And I guess the main verse, não bicha, não macho, olha no que eu virei, sou teu favorito, sou teu panlei. So translating, not a faggot, not a macho, look at what I have become. I'm your favorite, I'm your panlei. This is this song is a little over 2 minutes and it's marked by local references, a lot of alliteration, a punchy refrain, and its fastness translates the emergency I was feeling then and the urgency that has tinged my whole work throughout time. I remember I wrote this song when I was walking around Lisbon, and it's very often that musicians write songs in their head when they are in motion. The fleeting is always the most desired subject of poetry. So focusing again on the song, Panlei is a made-up word which cuts the last syllable of the original insult in Portuguese, as if I'm cutting the legs of a bad boy who is trying to run away after being mean. It is certainly fun and therapeutic to get into this little circus of tweaks with words, but let's get political. Is the subversion of an insult a queer tactic that is still fresh, or has it become an ineffective and co-opted cliche? This is a question here that it's out there for you and for me to deal with. It's so easy to be targeted and limited and laid out in a small epistemological frame when you are merely looking for a conceptual anchor, when you are looking for somewhere to rest your little head, when what you want, when what you need is in a material home worded by and for your body. It's so easy to be ignored. If you get the attention, will there ever be affection or only hype ready to be commodified? I always thought these cages were invisibly formed to enslave spirits whose imagination crafted presences, new beings, and subjectivities perceived as weird. More recently, I find myself studying the life and work of Farinha Master, a musician born in the 50s in the suburbs of Lisbon in a middle-class family, who built a body of work based on a very assertive sense of humor, an upfront social critique, and definitely lots of weirdness, and the sort of weirdness marked by the same inconvenience of sweat and tears in a disastrous prom night. A weirdness that lingers no matter what is the law and order of your mind. Farinha Master's body of work tackles many issues that I can't convey right now, but I would point out the strong ability to criticize and joke with Portuguese nationalistic ideas of identity, his parody of the musical scene, and very unexpectedly, his music is filled with constant anti-colonial stanzas delivered in poetic out-of-fictive songwriting. His main body of work happened in the 80s and 90s, and in my understanding of it, its reception was very poor and overlooked from a critical point of view, focusing only on its greatness and wackiness in terms of performativity. Yet it wasn't able to take the time to think about what was really going on there. I dare to argue that in the Portuguese context then, and to great extent still now, art, which is made in a methodology ruled by wild fun, humor, and a refusal of presenting itself in a rigid and serious form, is systematically pushed aside, subcapitalized, and frowned upon. In the best of chances, it gets an A plus in the outsider weirdo category, but it's very rarely regarded as respectable or worth preserving, let alone be critically analyzed with the necessary time and money that all reflection demands. It's tricky because the very own modus operandi of this methodology rejects the dusty musical classifications imposed by the status quo. This is art that lives and flourishes on the intensification of its harsh complexities, a complex maze of intention, feeling, form, and texture that makes classifications and hashtags useless. And this is just another day of me understanding context, my chosen context. And how can I dare to choose my context? Baby, don't lose yourself playing goddess. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Oh my gosh, that was wonderful. Um, yeah, wow. So we've just heard from Rodrigo, who, like I said, I met Rodrigo like on a dance floor at the Raincoats. It was very happenstance, but we just instantly connected. And I think a lot about how we all can come together in these spaces, like shows and like festivals, and how important they are, and how great it is, even though we're in the middle of a pandemic, we can come together right now and that we all get to talk. So, our next speaker, I met in Berlin, and I think we convinced. I mean, I've been spreading this rumor since we met that you're my cousin. So probably half the city of Berlin thinks that we're cousins. I mean, we got the look, baby. Um, but Yony Leyser is an artist, a writer, director, and educator with a focus on subcultures and queer history. In 2010, Leyser released his debut documentary feature film, William S. Burroughs' A Man Within, followed by his first fiction feature film, Desire Will Set You Free, in 2015. 2017 saw the release of Leyser's critically acclaimed documentary about the cultural and social movement queercore How to Punk Revolution, with an accompanying book due for release in late 2020, which I'm very excited about. Most recently, Leyser wrote and directed Warm Holes, his first theater production, which premiered in Berlin's Maxim Gorky Theater in 2019. Collectively, Leyser's films have been screened in over 150 institutions and festivals around the world, including Slamdance, Seattle International Film Festival, BFI London Film Festival, ZKM Karlsruhe, Biennale, Guadalajara International Film Festival, IDFA, ACMI Melbourne, Outfest, Frameline, and Hot Docs. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Yony, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, cuz.
You're welcome, cuz.
Yeah, Syra, that's cool that you worked with the Master Musicians of Jujuka. We used their songs, their music for my Burroughs film, and there was all this unreleased, undiscovered Jujuka recordings that I found at Lee Ronaldo's place, from Lee Ronaldo from Sonic Youth, recorded with them. And then we were just going through his old tapes, and we found all this old music they did together, which was cool, which he later released, we used in the film. So it was interesting digging through that archive. And Christy C. Rose, who's been brought up, also did some stuff on the book the queercore book that's coming out.
World's meeting.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And Rodrigo, I'm a big fan of Lisbon. Did a residency there at the ZDB. It was fun. But yeah, I guess I'll talk a little bit about collaboration within working, because I've moved more and more towards collaboration and getting rid of the hierarchy within working with film and theater. I found this to be especially easy, or much easier, with theater, and my last theater production and one that I'm planning now. I think I was able to, or I'm working on like Donna Haraway talks about diffractive reading. I'm kind of trying this kind of thing, like diffractive writing. Like, how do we take all of our attention deficit disorder approach, or how we approach rules? I think for me, at least, it's always been very difficult to follow the rules. And I think when you're different, when you know that you're different, when you look different, when you act different, you understand that the rules are not made for you, and there's someone writing it. So I've always thought about that. I'm always breaking the rules. And within the art world, I'm like, well, why can't I break the rules of the hierarchy here? So I think, like, if you take everybody's aspects and you work within a kind of chaos, you can have a nice result. We are within, especially the film world, we're always kind of told to find a professional, find someone that has learned that field, whether it's camera or continuity or acting, or someone that's worked within that field, that knows that field, that's become an expert, and that can fit into the puzzle piece that will become the final work. But I think it's problematic because who becomes those professionals? You know, it's usually middle class, or in the film world, usually upper class or upper middle class, white, you know, from families. And I think that if you work within the chaos or the unknown or the anachronistic sides of like having someone who has no experience, but, you know, has a je ne sais quoi, or someone that has a really amazing performance, performing arts background or something like that, and you work it within and you play with the chaos, I think you can have a really amazing result. And, you know, speaking of, again, the jujuka and the cut-ups, I mean, this was something done, this kind of chaotic element was done by Dadaists at the turn of the century. And, you know, like the cut-up method with William Burroughs and even like David Bowie, and all, the idea of taking the structure, breaking it apart and reassembling it. And instead of those pieces, I think, trying to fit into, I think we can play with the chaotic elements of it. And I did that again with this theater project entirely. I took 6 queers of different generations, from a trans woman in her 70s who was one of the first public trans women in Germany, to a young non-binary African-American drag performer, a couple that did a kind of a Genesis Pure Lady J melding into one Pandrogyny project, and a Colombian gay dancer. And we took the different generations and they all took their experiences and we went through time. So we used a kind of temporality, queer temporality idea, investigating their own histories, each other's histories, and people that inspired them or they knew about within the city. And so I think with that, we played with the fiction, we played with the hierarchy, we played with identities, we tried to destroy all of those things, and we presented the work as a collaboration. And it was so much more satisfying than directing kind of a straightforward documentary. So I think that if we kind of can work like that, or at least if I can continue to work that way, I'll be really happy. That my upcoming projects, other than the book, which is now finished, is a collaboration with a drag wrestling collective in New Orleans that I also kind of want to work collaboratively. Nadia, will you tell me my time? I forgot to look at the...
You're fine for time, like 4 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever.
Okay. All right. But yeah, I think also just like within, I guess like working within a collaboration, I've also tried to approach, in my films, I did a film, Desire Will Set You Free, in 2015 in Berlin. And for that, our script was like 5 pages long. We somehow managed to get great funding, like through the TV stations and through local funding, which usually have very strict guidelines, but somehow we were able to pitch it and work without having a fixed kind of schedule. And we would just completely improvise. We had a story, we had people playing themselves, we had performance artists, we had interacting with people on the streets, interacting with our actors, all in the same scene. And we just tried to feel the city, and we tried to feel the mood, and we tried to feel the people. We had a scene in May Day protests here where we just kind of like went into the protests, or went into the Golitzer Park, a public park here, and interacted with 2 Russian guys that were high on ketamine, you know, like with the naked trans people all around them. And, you know, like seeing the kind of anarchy that and beauty that it can bring. And then later we kind of edit it. We got to always follow my work, like kind of get a great editor that puts the pieces together and puts the story together. But and working with musicians like Dev Hines from Blood Orange was in the film, and he like covered a song which was like a lesbian punk band Malaria's song You, like, which he wrote like on the way here, like very last minute impromptu. And Nina Hagen, we got her the night before. We had originally written a part for a performance artist in New York called Penny Arcade, and last minute managed to get Nina Hagen because we were friends with her manager or whatever, and called him really spontaneously. And we just played with with her anarchy too. Like she couldn't read the lines, she couldn't really remember the lines. So we're just like, all right, let's just go with it. We didn't know if she knew really where she was on set or what was going on, but we're like, let's go with it, girl. And so she started talking about God and like her version of God, because she's become religious. And we cut it together to make it, after 2 hours of her talking about God, we cut it together to make it seem like it fit into the film somehow. And so I think like playing with this kind of like anachronistic ways of life, this non-professional approach, it can really create great works of art and collaboration. And I think that's in order to work towards a future, a non-racist, we always have to play with, I think we have to play with the obviously intersections beyond racism. I think, but taking away that hierarchy and the idea of professionalism is a really nice approach to reach that. So, yeah.
Yony, thank you. And I completely echo that. I really totally think that taking away this like hierarchy and like working with the anarchy in the moment, actually I'm working on a whole chapter about just that for my thesis right now. So thank you. It's great to hear people talking about that kind of energy. And thank you everybody for participating and for like sharing a bit of yourselves and your work and your, practices and your projects. And so what I want to do now is I would like to open it up to Lydia, Ami, Percy, and to each other. Like we can just all unmute and like maybe have a little conversation, ask a question. I can see that there's a lot of crossover between y'all. So, I would like to just open up the floor for any kind of conversation we want to have. Does anybody want to start with a question or a talking prompt or anything groovy like that? Percy.
It's so great to hear all your stories. Thank you so much. And to learn a bit about the sort of punk philosophy. I guess I'm curious, how do you find funding and economic survival as artists? Like are there trusted supporters or trusts and foundations, or do you just like do it like that, where there's a will there's a way? Can you talk a little bit about your kind of approach to the economy of it?
Who do you want to go first? Do you want to address someone first, or how should we do it?
Maybe just go in speaker order.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So Syra, would you like to answer the question first?
Sure. I mean, this year we had Arts Council funding for Decolonise Fest. It was the first time we'd actually had that. I have to say, I've only really increased my involvement with the festival in the last 2 years because, I was living in Portsmouth before that, and I was also always in Morocco around the time of the festival. But I'd supported it since the beginning. But yeah, I think I can't I'm not too big on the finance side of things, but I do think we operate on a DIY basis, which is keeping costs low, no frills. I mean, we're non-profit as well, so I would say that making money isn't the center of what we do, but we seem to get by somehow. But yeah,
by the seat of our pants we fly.
By the seat of our pants.
Rodrigo, what about you? How do you manage to like put work out and stuff? Because I know that you don't really work with like large labels or anything, but you have kind of like put out a lot of stuff. How do you manage to like finance that?
Well, it's mostly self-financed, but actually my latest record, we had the support of a Portuguese private foundation, which actually it's not a nasty one. It's this foundation that represents the rights and the royals of interpreting artists, so both actors, dancers, musicians, and they have open applications for Portuguese musicians. And our record got a grant. And so I was able to do a couple of things, and including flying to London and record with legendary Laura Logic. And so that was amazing. But regarding funding, for instance, the local queer feminist festival that I worked on in 2016 and 2018, which is still going on, but without my presence in it. What happened was a lot of local collaboration. So that like, for instance, businesses like bars, restaurants, local museums supporting each other, and so it created a route. So the festival itself, it's a route from place to place, and so that I believe that's something that I would advise always, to work locally. And as Syra said, like, keep it DIY, but if you actually need money, then try to get your money from locals first, and maybe get local businesses on board. Yeah.
That's a good answer. Yony, would you like to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, I mean, in the United States, art funding sucks. I mean, all my friends are really struggling. Either you work on a really high scale and you work with a big company like Amazon, at least in the film world, like Amazon or Netflix, or you are struggling, or you have a trust fund. And so I'm really blessed to live in Germany, which has one of the best funding structures in the world for arts, if not the best. And so people are like, "Are you going back?" And I'm like, "No, of course not." No, I get funding through German taxpayer money, which is also not like a big evil corporation that you don't want to deal with, and it's also a meritocracy, where it's like supposed meritocracy, where they judge each application based on its worth, not who you know, or whose dick you sucked, or, sorry for the language.
Okay.
But so it's not a lot of money. It's a socialist kind of structure. So it's like they want to give everybody, a lot of people, a little bit of money, the funds that I apply for, rather than just a few people a lot, which is nice. But life is still a struggle. But the funding system is really great here, and I'm really appreciative. And it's just like local funding. So there's like the city funding, state funding, national funding, TV funding, and then some private foundations. And it takes a lot of time, and you have to do a lot of writing, and 90% of making a film is doing this, and like writing all of these things and taking rejection. But it's something I've become kind of okay at after a lot of time of rejection and failure. But if people are interested, there's a lot of development kind of programs that people can get involved in. There's one, if people are interested in documentary, there's one called Documentary Campus Master School, which is what I did, which takes a bunch of people that have no experience with the funding world and introduces them to funding people. And it's EU state funded. It's for anyone in the EU or MENA region. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of those kind of, not a lot, there's some of those kind of initiatives, which are, but that's the route that I go.
I mean, I feel like Percy and Ami, you definitely have a lot of experience with spending a lot of time writing it for grants and money and stuff. So
I suppose we're always kind of, there's always a anxiety around like how transparent to be with, for example, the Arts Council, around the sort of politics of a project, and how sort of how vague to be in terms of what that funder will be turned on or off by. And now we've got the Conservatives saying that they don't want arts or education organisations to talk about politics at all. So it runs the risk of being quite silencing. Like there's this kind of
right.
Yeah. So I just wondered, because when you were talking about the principles of your work, it sounded like there's a dance, isn't there? A sort of.
I just shove it in their faces. And I found certain people that you can work with, like you have a person there you talk to, and I've had bad experiences, and now I have people that I work with, and I tell them, I'm like, this is queer, this is migrant, post-migrant themes, this is radical anarchist, whatever, and and I push it in their faces. I don't really hide it. And with Germany, we're lucky to have a really liberal left, especially Berlin. It's a super left government. So yeah, it's lucky. And we're just having the first, the film scene here is still super white and super Christian and super heterosexual. And so that's slowly changing. This year, there was big changes with two of the biggest hyped films of the Berlinale, Firas Shirat's film, Future Dry, and No Hard Feelings in English, and Burhan Kurbani's Berlin Alexanderplatz were two of the most hyped films done by kid of Afghani refugees and Iranian German queer Iranian German director, and those were the two hyped films. And I don't know any Berlinale, any other kind of, and Berlin Alexanderplatz was one of the most best funded independent films in Germany of the year. So I don't know if that's ever been the case in the past. Not in my knowledge. It's all been white, like straight white German that tell really boring, straightforward stories. So things are changing, and we're lucky to have this kind of a government, but who knows how long it will last. But my approach is always to not cater for them and just be as straightforward, which is not the best approach, I know, for a lot of people in a lot of places, but it's just my approach.
That's great. Yeah, I'm glad to hear about that significant changes coming around in Berlin, because I know that when I was living there, I felt like this kind of whitewashing of a lot of different cultural spaces. So we have a chat question from Lydia, who's leaving her mic and camera off, but she wants to hear more about the drag wrestling collective that you mentioned, Yony, and the project you're doing with them. Oh, and so does Persephone.
They're called Chokehold, 2 words, and they're from New Orleans, and you can look them up. There's a cool Vice article and a cool Gothamist article about them with some nice pictures you can check out. But I've introduced them to a theater here in Germany, and I think we're trying. It's not finalized, but hopefully they come out, and I want to do a documentary about them, and might be collaborating with some other artists in Berlin if it's possible. I have to still see about that. But yeah, I just really like Chokehold because they. I really like playing their play on the American spectacle, like both drag and wrestling being like this over the top American spectacle, because America's so messed up. And when you're from there and you've been abroad for so long, you're distant. And when you're there, you're just super depressed about it. So I think like if we can laugh and create a spectacle, I'm a big fan of satire, I'm a big fan of spectacle. So I think like if we can ridicule the American spectacle, whether it be through satiric comedy films or something like that, I really think it's a nice way to handle politics. And also there's such a diverse group, and there's a group that has worked with overcoming trauma, like, you know, the trauma of being in their bodies in the United States South and post Katrina. And I'm really interested in themes of post trauma, like what can be created post trauma, because I feel like there's so much radical potential in post trauma. So let's see how also post Corona trauma, how we rebuild and how we can rebuild after that, I guess.
Yeah, that's definitely something on the horizon, isn't it? Also, I mean, we have like this kind of imminent date coming up with the election next week, and just like what will, like, it's hard to imagine the world after that point, like in many different respects. But that's not anything that I really want to question right now. Does anybody have any questions or any prompts or anything?
I guess, sorry, was someone else?
Wait.
Yeah, just the idea of this collective trauma that we're all going through. It was quite a big theme in the zine this year, actually. There was a piece by someone called Priscilla Hernandez called "The Revolution is Within You," and yeah, it was just it really struck me as one of the standout pieces for me personally this year. It was all about transmuting trauma into solidarity and healing and resistance. And I do think that the virus has been traumatic for every single person in this country. Like it has exposed a lot of inequalities. So for me, yeah, and anarchy as well is a is a prop that I like in this conversation. I think yeah, how can we heal collectively while being our authentic selves in this political climate? Sorry.
Ami, you also had something you were going to say too. This is Ami, by the way. We didn't do an introduction. This is Ami, who also works at ONCA.
Yeah, meet everybody. Really lovely to hear about your work. I think I don't know if it's a very clear question. I was kind of wandering around how much consideration goes into who the work is being made for. And I guess I was kind of thinking around the tribes that we form, people that, you know, kind of know the work, like the work, and want to be part of the work, and stepping outside of that, which I guess kind of organisationally is something that, you know, yeah, I guess we kind of want to fish beyond sometimes. But I just wondered, in terms of your practices, how much you consider, you know, the kind of the non, you know, the people that are outside of your kind of, you know, I don't know, ideology sphere, I guess. Whether you find that relevant, or whether it is very strongly founded within kind of, you know, that the context of solidarity and working within that.
Okay. You're a little bit quiet there, Ami, but could you repeat the question a little and maybe do the speaker closer or something?
Oh, sorry, I don't. Oh,
It's okay.
I think I'm sitting on it. Yeah, so I kind of I was keen to know a bit more about, when you're making the work, around how much you consider who the work is for, and whether you kind of step beyond that. And yeah, I don't know. I guess when work becomes very, yeah, I guess speaking around audiences that or people that have been marginalised, how much do we then go beyond that? So, yeah.
Let's go reverse order this time. Yony, would you like to start with this question?
Sure. I have changed my opinion on this entirely. So I used to just really stick to my group. When I was an anarchist, the anarchists, with the punks, with the queers. And now I really strongly try not to do that. Because I think it's important with people that people have different points of view than me, that I deal with, and it comes very unnaturally to me. I want to hang out with POC people. I want to hang out with queers. I want to hang out with punks. I want to hang out with people with the same opinions as me, and I do end up doing that. But when I'm working, I try to have a more diverse group of people. I work with people who are religious. I work with people who have never kind of hung out with the queer people. I work with people who have never been around migrant people. I've been, and it's uncomfortable for me, but I think it's important. So I try to work outside of those tribes, and not form those too much tribes. And even within my social circles, and it's a place of discomfort. But I think within that discomfort, there's a lot of radical potentiality and room for creativity. And so, yeah. And I think, I think also, like, when we look at I never felt 100% part of a tribe, but from like such a crazy, diverse family that was just from everywhere and did everything and had every different kind of opinions, and always changing the countries and never being kind of accepted in the society, that it kind of came naturally to me to understand that there's no demagogy, there's no like religion that I want to be a part of, whether that be the demagogy of queerness, of the queer culture. That was the closest one I got to, but then now I'm moving away from it, understanding not to take it as a demagogy.
That's definitely a hard. I want to interject real quick that like it is very hard to like kind of like understand, first of all, who your community is when you are diasporic and like international that way, and then to like, think about yourself like in those contexts. Anyway, thanks for sharing. Rodrigo, would you like to answer?
Yeah, I'm absolutely on the same point as Yony. I believe like I make a distinction in the sense that like who I dedicate the work to. Well, in that case, yes, it's for people who sort of been through the same or worse, but I wanted to reach out to everyone, because if you're just preaching to the choir, like what's the point really? And I really like going and playing shows and talking in like small places, rural places outside big cities where people have never seen people who look like my band or whatever, or just like a fat body on stage. It's something new for them or whatever. So that's how I feel about it. I feel clashing is the only way to create culture.
I love that. Syra?
Yeah, I completely agree with Rodrigo's idea of how is preaching to the choir going to make change? It's like in London, yeah. Actually, I'm quite new to London, but there's a lot of people of color, punks of color, and I'm not used to that. I'm still getting used to it. But also, is London the place that really needs Decolonise Fest? I think it's the small towns around the country. And the same with touring with Jajuka. I've seen a lot of culture meetings through that band. Their festival every year in the village. People come from all over the world for their own reasons. The village itself is known for having the shrine of Sidi Ahmed Sheikh, which is the Sufi saint of mental healing. And yeah, you get people, the diasporic audience is very different to the audience of or the local Moroccan people, or it's a mix, it's a mega mix. And then you get superstars going there and rich Japanese businessmen who are sick of things in Tokyo and just need to get away. And everyone has their own story, and I think maybe it's a bit of a failing. I tend to see the best in people. Sometimes that backfires, and yeah, it can make you afraid to sometimes. But I think it's important to trust, to go in with trust, and to try and find the commonalities and connections before writing someone or something off.
Thanks for
Maybe
that.
that's the optimist in me.
No, I like that. I like the positivity. So I think we might wrap up soon, but does anybody have anything else they want to say or any other questions or
Yeah,
anything?
I like to have like a question both for Syra and Yony. That's regarding something. So I watched Yony's movie. You're the one about queercore during lockdown because there was a link somewhere like through like a Belgian thing. I don't know. And I'm a big fan of GB Jones, and it was really insightful for me to hear about how both GB Jones and Bruce LaBruce created this myth, and how like something so small in a basement, like two people just working their brains and carving this world, their own like subjectivity, created an actual thing. So like from a lie, from a fiction, something became real. And also the way that in a way Decolonise Fest caters for this small community, and then it can also generate and like reach out to audiences in Asia and Africa and the States. So how can that like, so I don't know, I'm just putting it out there. How do you feel that fiction and mythology and lying can be a powerful political tool in order to sort of invoke a utopia that then becomes a reality? That's just a question, or I don't know, a suggestion.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Syra, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
If you wouldn't mind, I'm still thinking about it.
I mean, this is something I've thought about a lot. You were saying the Decolonise Fest. It would have been cool to do a collaboration on the film with Decolonise Fest. I think a lot could have been added to the film. But as far as your question, yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, the thing is that history is a creation, right? It's not fact, right? History was created by certain people to benefit certain people. Unfortunately, if we look throughout history, that's been the case. So when we're talking about truths, there's no one truth. They're truths. It's a subjective truth. It's our story is the truth, right? So I think that's what GB Jones and Bruce LaBruce kind of were doing in queercore. They were creating a truth that made it a safer place for them. And I think it's a much nicer way to change society than always, because we can't always attack. At one point, our fists are going to become bloody, right? And so we have to let our fantasy and our imagination take over and create worlds that we want to live in, and tell people this is how the world is, because it's our world. We hear the mainstream view of the world, of how things are for most people, or how some people view the world. How about taking a minority position and showing them how the world could be, AKA in our imagination? It's just as much in my head a truth as what somebody else has documented, because it's their subjective reality. So I'm all about it.
Love that answer. Oh my gosh. Okay, Syra.
Okay, well, yeah, and you might know this quote. Nothing is true, everything is permitted, said in a burrowed voice. And yeah, I had a piece in the zine this year by an anarchist called V23. No name, obviously anonymous. And I had the task of having to ask them if they were actually white or not. Yeah, it's been interesting, but that yeah, it's just the idea of balancing things, because obviously we're a zine for punks of color, by punks of color. Don't want any weirdo white people sneaking their way in. But yeah, they did a really great piece where they included that quote, and yeah, it blew my mind actually, because I know that quote from obviously it's the Hashishins. Yeah, it's a radical piece, and I think it is the way we can reclaim a message that has existed in one space and take it in another space, and what that means, and how that can still be absolutely valid, I guess. But yeah, having to vet that as an editor was very interesting. Ultimately, I still don't have any hard evidence that they're not a fat white guy sat by their computer or something, and it's just like yeah, I published it on trust, basically, and I kind of hope they are who they say they are, but it's a great piece any which way.
You had some great I was telling Nadia that I'm a big fan of Ali Logout, the special interest, who I think is the best. I mean, she's one of the most wild, they're one of the most wild, interesting artists, I think, right now in America. So I learned about your festival through them, through their participation, their feedback. Yeah.
It's mad that their record was released actually by someone I know here in the UK, Michael Kasparis, for Night School. Again, it's yeah, these things cross continents, and it's needed here.
Syra, before we end, Persephone texted, where can we purchase a zine if we would so wish to do so?
The zine is on the Decolonize Fest Gumroad. I can send you a link, but if you Google Gumroad Decolonize Fest, we have a shop. £6. But yeah, if you want a few copies for any reason, just email decolonizefest@gmail.com and we'll sort you out.
Okay, so now to end things, I drew a tarot card from Christy C. Rhodes' deck for us, and it is the High Priestess, featuring actually my dear friend 80 from the States. I know that some of us know a little bit about the High Priestess, but I really attribute the High Priestess card with like intuitive leadership and like community building and care for people around you. And I think that today you guys have shown me a lot of care in sharing your processes and your art, and given me so much to think about. And I'm really grateful that we all got to sit down and talk together today.
Me too.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to stop the recording now.